Eric, welcome to This is Horror.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be on again. I'm really excited to talk with you both.
Yeah, so the last time we spoke was about a year ago. So I'm wondering, what have been the biggest changes for you, both personally and professionally, in the last year?
There have been a lot of changes. I feel really fortunate in that I know that my fiction has a pretty wide reach now because of the success of Things Have Gotten Worse. I do feel a little bit of responsibility for writing what's authentic to me, um, and paying mind to, the people that do enjoy my work. I try not to think too much about audience and readers when I'm crafting stories, but um, given that I do have that wider reach now, which is phenomenal for like a queer horror writer. It does enter my mind occasionally. But another big thing that has really been important to me as I kind of navigate just the zaniness of the horror community and networking and meeting readers and doing podcasts. Like, I really try to make an effort to be kind to myself, allow myself to make mistakes, learn from them. Um, it's we're all human. I tend to beat myself up quite a bit for things that I probably know I shouldn't. I just can't control. But that's just how I am. Um, but there have been just countless changes, just professionally and creatively. But I'm just so grateful that I have the readers that I do, the very kind-hearted people that reach out to me on Instagram and Twitter and tag me and stuff. I didn't have really any of that like 2 years ago, and it's been such a whirlwind now to have those connections with readers and people who really respect what I'm trying to do for queer horror. It's very special and very humbling. So I try to be mindful of that every day, and I also try to protect my creativity, and just I said in the previous segment, just um, being like protecting yourself, because your writing will suffer if you don't protect your creative spirit and the part of your soul that wants to write and wants to tell stories. That is just so important. So I'm a big advocate for um, just encouraging people, their mental health, and trying to stay positive as much as possible.
Mm. And in terms of being hard on yourself, I mean, what are some of the things that you're hard on yourself about? And as you say about trying to stay positive, I mean, what kind of things do you practically do to actually make that a reality?
I mean, so it could be anything. I mean, there are little moments throughout the day where you just have to kind of reframe your thinking. You maybe see a negative comment on Twitter, and you could easily spiral, and you could easily be
Mm,
like, "Oh, that person's right. That person's right. Like, I don't know how to write. I'm a terrible writer." All of that. Or you can kind of just accept it for what it is. It's someone's opinion, and just reframe how you think it. I've talked to my agent a lot about this, and basically, what helps me the most is learning that there are no absolute truths between the good reviews and the bad reviews.
mm,
They're just neither one is more important than the other. and neither one is truer than the other. We all come from different backgrounds. We bring different experiences to our reading tastes and everything, and what works for one person doesn't work for the other person. And but that doesn't mean that one-star review is not valid. It is valid, but
Mm.
that five-star review is also valid. You know what I mean? It's just about
Mm.
reframing how you look at things, and I've really been trying to do that a lot more lately, because occasionally I will get tagged in like a negative review on Instagram, and it does kind of sour my day a little bit. But it really is just being mindful of it and not responding. That's a big one for
Right.
me, is
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
responding to anything that you're tagged in that's really, really negative. I
Mm.
was tagged in something about a book that I really, really love by an author that I'm very good friends with, and
Mm.
I just didn't respond. And it was a really hateful comment about this person's book. And I
Mm.
wanted to respond. I felt compelled to say something and stand up for my friend, but the way the Twitter algorithm works is it rewards that kind of negativity.
Yeah.
It really kind of is like that breeding ground for negative consumption. And I just try not to I just try to just ignore it and let it be. And if people are, mad at me or saying things about me or people that I know and love, I just don't engage with it. That's like the biggest piece of advice I could give to anybody that's starting out in writing horror and they're like navigating the social media landscape, is just, try not to engage with the negative stuff. Really try to, obviously nothing, it's not all positive all the time. It's not all, sunshine and roses, but you don't have to engage with the trolls. And that
Mm.
is, I really try to stand by that, and I really try to, like, you know, encourage that behavior in myself and others.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and in terms of reviews, I mean, are reviews something that you actively read these days, or are you mostly just reading these things because obviously you've been tagged in it and you're only human, so it's been brought to your attention?
Yeah, I mean, there are days that I do look.
Mm.
I probably shouldn't, but I do look. I'm not gonna lie and say I don't, because I am curious what people think of what I create. Um, it's not a conversation that I necessarily think I deserve to take part in. Like, that's a reviewer space. That's a reader's space. Like, I know
Mm.
I don't belong there. So I don't have any right to really comment on anything that's being said, but a part of me is curious, and I do
Mm.
occasionally look. But I pretty much I will always look if I'm tagged in something, just because I
Mm.
usually retweet the good stuff, but I
Mm.
want to make sure that it's a good review. I don't want to,
Yeah.
you know, accidentally post like a one-star review of my book.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, no, I think I don't think there's necessarily any harm in looking at reviews if you're mentally prepared for that, the reaction that you might have if you see something that is really negative. I've seen reviews before that have really gotten under my skin and have, ruined like multiple days, not just like one day. But that
Mm.
was kind of when things have gotten worse first came out, and I was just kind of learning my own threshold with reviews, and what I could take and what I can't take. And I know for a fact I never look at reviews right before you're going to sit down and write something, because
Yeah.
that will like mess you up so much. Like, you won't be able to write anything. And it goes back to
Yeah.
what I'm saying about like protecting your creativity and your mind from from anything that's going to negatively impact it. Um, I try as much as possible to stay out of reviewer spaces for that reason, because at that point the book belongs to them. It's something I created, but it's a discussion between, readers now. And that's how it should be. Like, the books are for readers. I write them because I want people, because, well, first of all, I want to tell stories, and I love telling stories, but the goal is to have other people read them and react to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I kind of know what you mean about too. If you read a bad review and then sometimes, like, for days, there can be like a line or a sentence or a criticism that just kind of replays in your mind. But I mean, like you said, when
Totally.
you were speaking with your agent, if the good reviews are valid, then the bad reviews are valid too. So I just try to kind of remind myself that, like, well, even though these negative things have been said, here are some of the positive things that have been said. And particularly if I think about, peers or people that I respect. And I mean, you've had so many people say great things about your work. I mean, including Master of Horror and living legend Ramsey Campbell. So, if Karen from
Yeah.
down the road has a negative thing to say, you can hopefully just remind yourself that Ramsey Campbell had a very positive thing to say and function and get on with your day.
And I
Mhm.
do that. Like, I was very lucky recently. I received a blurb from Bentley Little, who is one of my, like, just love Bentley Little
Yeah.
so much. And that that carries me through a lot. The Ramsey Campbell blurb carries me through a lot. The Mariana Enriquez blurb, that also
Yes.
carries me through. I'm very good friends. I'm going to name drop Priya Sharma, who is just like
Mm.
wonderful, wonderful fantasy horror author. We've chatted quite a bit, and we're very friendly. In fact, I dedicated this book, "The Trees Grew Because I Bled There," to her, because
Mm.
before we were friends, her fiction meant so much to me. Her writing, her command of language, and just her way of storytelling is just breathtaking. But she suggested compiling, all of the good, all of the good blurbs, the positive emails from your editor, from your agent, and kind of creating like a little scrapbook and kind of holding on to that. That way, when there are negative moments, because there will be negative moments, just open that book and leaf through it and just remember, you are appreciated, you are valued, you're a good writer. People,
Mm.
the some of the greats think that you're a great writer, and I hold on to that. I definitely hold on to that because there are so many days writing and just existing in this business that I question why did I do any of this in the first place?
Right.
Because it is so
Yeah.
stressful and it's very lonely. It's very isolating. It's very difficult. It's difficult for me to connect with other people sometimes and just like make friends. Um, so it's very important to have that little scrapbook, whatever it is. Maybe it's a file on your desktop computer that you just open and look at, and you see, blurbs that you've received or emails. Just keep something that reminds you just to keep going, because if you keep going, something will happen if you're tenacious
Mm.
enough. I really do. I truly believe that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned getting a blurb from Bentley Little, perhaps one of the most elusive writers in horror. How on earth did
Mhm.
this come about? How I hardly even hear of Bentley corresponding with people, let alone giving blurbs. This is miraculous. What happened?
We're actually we're actually pen pals now. He sends me letters. Like, he sends me letters in the mail.
Wow.
Like,
Mm.
he doesn't use
I am not
email.
surprised. That is so old school and so Bentley.
It's so iconic. I received the first letter from him that contained the blurb, and
Yeah.
I was beside myself because he's such an icon. He's, like you said, he's
Mm.
very elusive. Um very elusive, but just such an icon of horror. And it really came about because I basically just I asked my publicist who I'm working with for my novel that's coming out in June from Clash Books. I asked
Mm.
her, what are the chances we could get Bentley Little, like a blurb from Bentley
Yeah.
for this book? And she said, "Well, let me reach out to his agent and see what we can do." And she reached out and the agent responded pretty promptly. And I don't know if maybe Bentley had heard about me, but
Mm.
regardless, like, he was interested in reading the book. And we sent it to him, and it wasn't even like a week or two later, and I got a letter in the mail from him with a little letter, like typed and
Yeah.
everything, and the blurb attached on another sheet of paper. And uh we've gone back and forth now a couple times, just like sending each other letters. And it's just like so special. Like, I never imagined I'd be able to like interact with these authors that I read like growing up, in high school, when I was like hiding in the school library during lunch and
Yeah.
just reading. It's just mind blowing to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it almost sounds like it was a bit of a offhand comment that you made to your agent, and you never actually expected, to get this blurb or to get it so damn quickly and with the personalized letter as well.
Yeah, it was unreal. I mean, I really didn't think anything was going to come of it. And he was just so prompt and
Mm.
so gracious, so kind.
Mhm.
Um, just very like I am forever a Bentley Little fan.
Yeah. Yeah. Since you mentioned your agent, is your agent a new development in the last year? Or did you have this agent beforehand?
I believe I had her when we spoke last. Her name's Priya, and she is a an agent based in New Jersey, and she also represents Jonathan Jans.
Mm.
So she works with him, and she's phenomenal. I mean, she's just so great. I know that she's in my corner 100%. And it was Ryan, my manager, who because he works with Jonathan Jans as well.
Mm.
Jonathan signed with Priya first, maybe 2-3 years ago. And when I was kind of receiving all of the initial success from Things Have Gotten Worse since we last spoke, the original novella from Weird Punk, Ryan was saying to me, we really need to look at seeing if we can get you in touch with an agent, because that's when kind of offers were starting to come in from various publishers.
Mm.
That's when I started working with Titan. And Ryan just thought like it'd be great for us to have an agent on the team. And we met with a couple agents, but I really gravitated toward Priya just because she's so kind and so gentle with giving notes, giving feedback, giving bad news even. She's
Mm.
just very, very skilled at interacting with writers, and she's an agent who like loves writers. I feel like, I
Mm.
mean, all agents I feel like love writers, but she's really entrenched in that world, and just this very supportive person. So it's great to have her in my corner.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, my understanding is in terms of her. clientele that you and Jonathan Jan stand out a little bit because it's not all kind of horror writers that she represents. So maybe she's now kind of gravitating in that direction or diversifying her portfolio. But I do remember because like I've looked at her website before and I did think, wow, you and Jonathan stand out here.
We do. We definitely do. She's more of like a literary fiction agent, I would say, like even nonfiction.
Mm,
But she's great with genre fiction too. And I mean, what matters to her really is just a compelling story with
mm,
interesting, rich, dynamic characters, and
mm.
she. I think she's opened up a lot more so with Jonathan and I now kind of being
Mm,
represented by her. I feel like she's now more in that horror space.
mm,
And she appreciates the genre. I think.
yeah.
I hope.
Well, yeah, one imagines so. She wouldn't have you and Jonathan. I think it's
Right,
implied.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But at the start, you were saying about how, it's important that you write an authentic story. You operate on so many different levels and each story of yours is incredibly unique. So I'm wondering, what is an authentic Eric LaRocca story and how do you know when you're delivering something authentic as opposed to when it's not quite ringing true?
That's a great question. Not to, you know, generalize too much, because every story is different, and every process I take to complete a new story is a little different than the last. But I would say like a true Eric LaRocca story is unabashedly queer, and it is dealing with complex psychological, uh, sometimes like sexual components, uh, and to decipher if I've delivered that, I can usually tell pretty quickly. I get invited to anthologies pretty regularly, and I sometimes have to turn them down, to be honest, because I know that I couldn't deliver my best self in the
Mm,
theme of what they're looking for. I'm someone who I I don't always love writing with kind of like a like the story has to be about this. Like I
mm,
kind of stumble and fall when it comes to that stuff. I like to be a little bit freer. I'm an outliner. Like I love to outline, but I struggle with kind of being pushed into a certain box and being told like it needs to include these ingredients for it to be like
mm,
in this anthology. So I do struggle sometimes, and I do find that there are times when I come out of a story and I finish writing it and I thought, I tried, but it just didn't work for whatever reason. And those are the stories that I kind of will banish to, like, the depths of my hard drive, and maybe like I'll
right.
pilfer sections of it and scavenge for jewels
Mm,
that I can kind of take and put them in you know other pieces. uh but it's an ongoing process, like learning what learning what your strengths are as a writer, and really what you want to say. And honestly, I feel like I'm still kind of discovering myself as a writer. I know that might sound really weird for some people to hear, but I feel like I'm still growing, and I don't know, like, if I want to keep writing just strictly horror. Like there are parts of me
Mm,
that want to branch into, literary fiction and,
mm,
not genre specific fiction. And I mean, there are stories in uh, The Trees Grew Because I Bled There. Like there are stories in that book that, I mean, they're horror, but you could easily classify them as just literary fiction as well. Um, they are horrific and bleak, but um, sometimes I get, I don't necessarily like engage in like the genre label. Like when I write a story, like I'm just writing what really interests me and what captivates me. And there are tons of people that read my stuff and they say, "Oh, well, this isn't really horror." And my initial reaction when I see stuff like that online is I don't get upset because it is horror and it's not horror. Like it's horrifying, but like
mm.
it can be anything. It is what you think it is. Like it's not my job to tell you, okay, this is explicitly horror. What I'm writing is this is the genre. I mean, it's marketed as horror, but it can be anything. Like
Yeah.
my pieces could be anything they want to be, and I think I like that freedom of just being whatever I want to be and telling the story that I need to tell at that time.
Yeah. And I think when people say it's not horror, it's like, okay, so that's completely valid. But I don't even know if that genre classification, apart from a marketing and selling point of view, is that important. I think the better question is like, well, did you enjoy it? Did it resonate with you? Did you get something from it? That's
Totally.
what's important about the story, not whether we call it horror or literary or social commentary. Um, and by the way, I think you're fiction has elements of all of those things. And I mean, I think it is literary a lot of the time because, like, just on a sentence by sentence level, there's so much poetry. And I think that kind of certainly gives it a literary essence. But as I say, classification is ultimately unimportant. It's like, did this piece move you? Did you feel something? That is what it's all about.
I totally agree. And at the end of the day, like I love being a horror writer. I love that people know me as a horror writer. Um, but if someone says like this isn't horror, I really don't like I don't care. Like I just care
Mm,
if the story worked for you. If
mm,
like I don't set out to write a story and say, "Oh, I really want to like, scare people. I really want this to be like, I want this to be as horrifying as possible." I really just want to tell the story and have something that's impactful and that's emotionally resonant with people, with readers. I really don't care. I mean, at the the end result is kind of like the marketing and marketing it as, okay, this is horror, you know. But in the beginning stages, when you're crafting the story, when you're building the bones and like the framework of everything, the genre is really not that important. It's really about the characters and what story you're telling. Um, and I think that's something that I really just that's what's on my mind mostly when I'm starting a new piece. Is I'm not necessarily thinking like, okay, I need to like this is going to be a horror piece, like I
mm,
need to have these sort of ingredients, these elements. Like I don't think like that. I think more like just structure of characters and their arcs and how I want certain beats to go in the story. um that's just how I work.
mm. Yeah, yeah. And you've got a 3-book series coming from Titan. So I'm wondering,
Yes.
how did that come about? And did you write the initial book and then, you were asked about, is there a series in this, or was it originally conceived as a free book thing?
Yeah, it was originally conceived as a 3-book project, as a trilogy. Um, I I hope I'm allowed to talk about this, but I'm just gonna go for it. I started just developing the story that I was just very passionate about, still obviously still am, and I started developing it like last year in the autumn, and I started just outlining the first book and compiling notes and everything that I wanted to submit to Titan for like review and, see if my editor was interested there. And we heard from her that she could take a, a proposal of mine to the team and,
Mm,
sell it as a proposal as opposed to like a finished work. It's more in traditional publishing. It's a little tricky because you need a finished product, or you need at least
mm,
like a sample of the
mm,
project done. But Titan and I have been working together for quite a bit. I have 2 books coming out with them in 2024. They're pretty much publishing like all of my material. So I have a very good relationship with Titan, and I have a fabulous relationship with my editor Kath at Titan. And she took the books to, or she took the proposal to acquisitions, and they loved it. They thought it was a fantastic direction for me to go in. It's horror, but there's a bit more fantastical elements to it. It's still rooted in human beings doing horrible things to one another.
mm,
I That's just something I love to explore. But there is some fantasy. There are some fantasy elements in the trilogy. But I have the whole trilogy outlined. I don't necessarily think there will be more than 3 books, but I'm about halfway finished writing the first book as of recording this interview right now.
mm,
So I'm looking
mm.
forward to keep moving forward, and it's going to be my life for the next year or so, working on the rest of these books.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, it's such a kind of surreal experience too, particularly the way that publishing works, to then be like, you've kind of got mapped out your publications until 2026, like, a point where we're nearer the next decade then. It's gotta
I
feel a
know.
little bit strange.
It does, and it also like it forces me to pause and be very grateful because
Yeah.
a couple years ago I didn't have these opportunities. I
Mm,
certainly didn't have these privileges, and to be able to work with a publishing house as great as Titan, and to work
mm,
with such a phenomenal editor, it really is like such a gift. And I'm just very, very, very grateful that I have these opportunities now. And it's really because of things have gotten worse since we last spoke. That book just opened so many doors for me and really showed folks that people were interested in what I had to say, what I had to write, and that that book just means a lot to me for how many doors it opened and how many people I met because of it.
mm. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it sounds like you have a very special relationship with Titan and indeed with your editor, Kath. But how did you know that this was kind of the relationship for you? How did you know, okay, this is a good kind of thing that we've got going on here?
I think because I received such like gentle care with her.
Mm,
Like going through edits, I she really cares about my work. And you know, my team, me, Priya, my agent, and my manager Ryan, were like a little just microcosm, little group, and
Mm,
it's so special to have an editor like Kath come on board and really champion your work. When you find an editor who is kind of like works with you effortlessly, where it's not a struggle to like interact with that editor, when you have that relationship, and more importantly when you have an editor who's willing to go to bat for you and pitch your material to the powers that be, that you can't buy that. You can't buy
mm,
that kind of relationship. And I knew it was the right fit, like almost immediately, just based on her, just based on her warmth and her positivity with editing the collection. Things have gotten worse since we last spoke, and other misfortunes. That was a phenomenal experience. And going forward, we sold her uh, a novel that I wrote and a novella collection. Both are coming out next year in
mm.
2024. Um, so she's just been so supportive of my work. And I always feel very valued whenever I'm interacting with her. And I think that that's the key. Like, if you find an editor that really believes in your work and really champions you, the rest will fall into place.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's apparent from talking to you, particularly when we talk about, your really good relationships, that the thing that people have in common is being gentle and being really supportive and passionate. So it makes me wonder, does this mean kind of prior to this that you've had some professional experiences where it's kind of the opposite, where people have been very aggressive or dismissive and just basically treated you in all the ways that one would not want to be treated?
Well, I'm a very sensitive person. Like, I own that. I'm I'm very sensitive, and I can tell when somebody doesn't like me, or when I'm not a priority for somebody.
Right.
And I feel like anybody can really tell that. I mean, it's pretty
Yeah.
apparent. Like, if somebody is just not interested in you and like your craft and furthering your career, like, it's pretty obvious. Um
Mm,
as far as like working with previous presses, like, I've been very lucky in that I haven't really worked with that many jerks. I've pretty much everybody I've worked with has been phenomenal, like in the
mm,
indie circuit, indie horror scene. Um, but that being said, like, it is important for me to have like a relationship with an editor, and them just be kind and considerate and just easy to approach. That's a big thing. Is that if they're kind of guarded, and maybe not even that responsive, you kind of know that, like, you're not their priority. So with Kath and with Titan, I know that I'm her top priority. Like, I know that she's going to answer my emails. I know that she values me as a writer. I know she wants to continue to work with me, and that in and of itself is just worth so much. And I think you're right, because a lot of the pretty much everyone I talked about, like, is very gentle and very like
mm.
kind. Like, Priya, my agent, she's very understanding. Ryan is just my manager, is just like the sweetest guy you'll ever meet.
Yeah.
Just so compassionate and thoughtful. And it's rare when you find those people in any community. You just want to like hold on to them as much as possible, because
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
every you know there there are just, there, unfortunately, there are not great people out there, and
Right.
when you find the people that you click with, it's important to just keep them and, you know, develop that relationship.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Ryan is so warm and sweet and so goddamn smart as well. And
Oh,
I
so
don't know,
smart.
I I cannot sing his praises enough because he's kind and compassionate, but he also knows when to take a deal and when not to take a deal. It's like the perfect combination of what you want with somebody
Mhm.
representing you. And I mean, I think this is why we get representatives, because I suppose as writers it's like, someone wants to publish a book or someone wants to make it into a film, and it's like, okay, let's take that. And it's like, whoa, 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 no, let's step back. Let's look at the deal. Let's make sure that we're taking the right thing rather than the first thing. And, that's what managers and agents can really help us with.
Totally. I mean, my dad, like, doesn't know a lot about the writing industry. He was a pilot for American Airlines, so he's like not
Mm,
in the writing world at all. But his major advice to me when I was first starting out was to find people that, you know, would be able to guide me and offer just assistance to me when I needed, expertise on something. Uh, it's important to have those relationships because you obviously can't know everything, and you need someone to like bounce ideas off of. I mean, I'm when deals are presented, I'm very quick to just be like, "Oh yeah, that's fine. Let's just go with that." But Priya and Ryan are much more thoughtful than I can be with stuff like that being presented, and it just makes for a it makes everybody it just benefits everybody more in the end
mm,
when you have those people on your team that can be like, all right, Eric, like, calm down, we're gonna take this slow, we're going to like think about what we're gonna do next, we're gonna do this. It's just very important to have those people that can kind of guide you and talk you off the ledge when you need to be talked off the ledge.
yeah, yeah. And with you now having so many projects on the go and so many things that you'll be working on for the next few years, has that shifted your writing routine? And what does that look like in terms of the time that you're dedicating to writing? And then, of course, the other things that you have going on in your life?
Yeah, so I work a day job. So I work part-time at a day job, a
Mm,
research company in Boston. I'm like an admin assistant. And I do that for like 5 hours every day. And once I'm finished with that, I, close my computer. I work remotely, so that's great. I can just, stay in my apartment all day. And I start my next shift, which is my writing. And
yeah.
I do that like late in the afternoon, early evening, and when I'm working on a project, like I am right now, working on the first novel of that trilogy, I really try as much as possible to write at least 2,000 words every day, and I write
Mm,
Monday through Friday. So I take Saturday and Sunday off usually just to like recharge and, you know spend time with my partner and just, do things
mm,
other than stare at a computer screen for like 4 or 5 hours. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, so I try to average like 10,000 words every week.
Mm,
And I do find that, there are times that I push myself a little too hard, and it does result in like a little bit of a burnout. But I do try to limit myself if I'm not feeling particularly inspired that day, or maybe I don't want to write maybe I just don't want to write, I won't really push myself, because I don't want the work to suffer. I don't want to write something that's just not in my heart. I don't want to
Mm,
create, I don't want to have to redo it later. I'd rather, do it as efficiently as much as possible. Like, obviously it's not going to be perfect the first go around, but I want to be as present and as focused as possible whenever I'm writing. And there are days that that just doesn't happen. There are days that other stuff comes up, and the priorities are just very different, and you have to focus on answering emails, or
mm,
doing Zoom meetings, and your mind just isn't on the writing. So I try not to push myself too much when I'm kind of in the trenches working on a book. But uh, I my schedule is very nice in that it allows me that flexibility to work like in the morning for the day job,
mm,
do my routine, and then kind of you know, switch off that part of my life, and then move into
mm.
the writing, which is obviously my one true love.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I imagine, because I can't recall if you mostly pants or plot, but I assume there must be at least an element of plotting. The fact that you've outlined 3 books, so you have to have some sort of sense as to where you're going. Um, so I
No, I'm
mean,
an
what
outliner.
does
I definitely am an outliner.
yeah, yeah. And so then in terms of those 2,000 words, are you when you kind of sit down, are you going over the previous day's words as well, or is it pretty much a case of like you just start where you left off and then the next draft will be the next draft rather than kind of drafting as you go?
Yeah, I edit while I write, so I'm
Right.
able to kind of go through, write that day, the scene or
Mm,
the chapter, whatever 2000 words gets me, and I can go through it, edit as I go, stop once I'm satisfied, and then go back in and look at what I've done, edit a little bit more, and then that night or the following morning while I'm doing other things, I'll be thinking of, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next
mm,
scene or chapter that I'm going to focus on? And uh, every project I write is different in that it's a different sort of routine for the most part, but it's also similar in that I plan as much as possible, but I
mm,
allow myself the freedom to have those moments where, oh, a character did something unexpected. I'm going to go down this
mm,
path and see where it leads. And it might lead nowhere, or it might lead somewhere that I hadn't really thought of before, and it might be perfect for what I'm trying to convey with this particular character, or this the story that I'm trying to tell. So I try to be as like flexible as possible while I'm writing, but it's when I'm working on a project, like I'm kind of useless for all other things, and I apologize to my boyfriend repeatedly because he'll be talking to me and asking me stuff, and I'm like, I'm listening, but I'm like not listening because I'm thinking about what I'm going to be writing tomorrow. um, but he's also a writer, so he understands.
yeah. What kind of genres is he writing in?
He writes young adult fantasy, so very different than horror. He does
Mm,
read all my stuff that I write, so he's a great beta reader. Really great
mm.
feedback.
Yeah. How does he get on with your fiction? Because there's a lot of things that they're uncomfortable. They're difficult to stomach. And if your world is more YA fantasy, I mean, this is intense for him, Eric. You're giving him some really hard
Yeah.
stuff.
I know, I feel like I'm always apologizing to him when I deliver, like, a new manuscript for him to read.
Yeah.
I'm always like, "I'm
Yeah.
really sorry. There's, like, so much dismemberment in this one. There's so much
Right.
mutilation."
Yeah.
But he's so supportive. I mean, he's phenomenal, and another person that is very supportive despite the subject matter is my mom. My
Yeah.
mom still reads, like, a lot of my material that I publish. She's another person that I will just send like a new short story to, and
Mm.
she'll give me feedback. And actually, one of her favorite short stories that I've written is "I'll Be Gone by Then," which is one of the short stories in the collection "The Trees Grew Because I Bled There," which
Mm.
is surprising because that story is all about like a a person fantasizing about getting rid of their mother.
Yeah.
So it seems unlikely that my mom would respond so well to it, but I think she's able to separate me from the fiction, and
Yes.
my boyfriend is able to do that as well. Um, so they're great. They're great first readers.
It is a good job because a lot of bad things happen to partners and family members within your fiction. But I think,
Yeah.
I mean, it's clear from every time we speak to you how much love you have for the people close to you. And I remember you saying last time that your parents are kind of always there at various like book readings and events, and that they've just been like a constant source of love and support. So, in spite of what may happen on the page, it's pretty evident that, yeah, one can separate the art from the artist, thank goodness.
Right. Yeah, no, they are very, very supportive, and um, they do come to my events when I have them. And uh, you know, my mom has been my number one fan, like as long as I've been alive. So, uh, she's the one that really introduced me to horror when I was really little.
Yeah.
So I feel like a really just strong attachment to her, and a lot of gratitude for her for introducing me to this great genre.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, you said that your word count that you're aiming for each day is 2,000 words. And I know that when I started writing, I would always think of like a kind of minimum word count, and I'd chase the words and I'd be really hard on myself if I didn't meet them. But I think something that I've learned in recent years is, as well as having a minimum word count, for me at least, it can be helpful to have a maximum word count, because there just seems to be diminishing returns when I get to a certain point. Or if I don't, I guess because of my personality, if I don't set a maximum, I could just keep going and going and going. And then, be kind of harder on myself because it's like, oh, well, that day you somehow pumped out 11,000 words, and today you've done 4,000. The hell is wrong with you? So, I wonder, do you too find that if you don't kind of stop at some point, that there are diminishing returns? Or is is this something where it's like, no, that the time you have, you can fill with absolute LaRocca gold?
I don't know about that, but I think my goal is to hit 2,000. I
Mm,
I don't I don't beat myself up if it's lower than that, if it's like around 1,000, maybe
yeah.
1,500. That's not a problem. There have been sessions that I've written 5, 6,000 words in one seated writing session. I find that after I do that, I am harder on myself because I'm like, oh, well, you just wrote all this material yesterday. Why aren't you duplicating that today? But once again,
Mm,
it's all about reframing your mind and realizing that some days there are going to be days that you write more than other days, and that's okay. You're still ahead in the game. And honestly, I try not to even really think of word count that much while I'm writing, because if you write like even 2 or 3 words a day, like they will add up eventually. Like I hope people realize, like, there are really no rules when it comes to like writing, like word
mm,
count, like just write until you're satisfied. And if it's not working for you, like just step aside, put it aside, and do something else, and then come back to it, or don't come back to it, and work on a different project. But I try to be like understanding toward myself, and I try not to put limits or put unrealistic expectations on myself, because then like I'm just miserable, and I feel like I'm
right.
just like a machine, crafting
Mm,
something, and it's like it's not authentic then.
yeah. Yeah.
You said something earlier about you when you write and then you your next day you're thinking of the next scene. Do you leave yourself off at the end of a scene? And if you do you have a hard time getting back into the scene? Because I mean, something that I learned a long time ago is that if you finish a scene and you're pretty much done, you've spent at least start the next scene.
Yeah,
In other words, like when you go to if you end a chapter, start the next chapter. You don't have to
yeah.
do anything with it, but at least get a sentence or two down to where you have a starting point instead of staring at a blank page going, "Oh fuck,
And
where do
that's
I go
exactly
now?"
what I do. That's
Okay, okay.
exactly what I do. Yeah, I usually, if I end a scene, I will always write like 1 or 2 sentences of the next
Mm-hmm.
section, just so that I can slip back into the story.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I don't do that, I'm like you said, I'm just staring at a blinking cursor, and I
Yeah.
can't put myself in the mental framework of what I was thinking like yesterday. Uh so I always try to finish a scene, finish a chapter, and then
Mm-hmm.
go into something else, and then stop.
Mm-hmm.
So that way I don't ever start cold.
Right. And someone told me that's like it's like you're tricking yourself because as a writer, you're also a reader. And so, as a reader, you don't want to be left with a cliffhanger. So, why would
Right.
you leave yourself in creation with a cliffhanger? And that's the way it
Right.
was presented to me. And I was like, well, man, it makes sense because when I first started, I was writing, I'd write a chapter and be like, okay, well, I guess tomorrow I'll write chapter four, and then it's like, well, where do I go from here? So,
Right.
yeah, that's the way when you said it earlier, I was like going, "Oh man, is he strong enough to where he just thinks about the next scene and can start with a blank page? That's some strength there."
That's kind of the Ramsey Campbell approach as well, writing the next sentence in the chapter, because I remember that was one of his tips he gave us when
Hmm.
he was on the show. And yeah, if you do that, then you're hopefully never going to be stuck, or you're going to at least minimize being stuck. And I mean, I tend to find the hardest part of writing any story is literally that first sentence. And I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I can spend so long agonizing over it, but I do find for the first draft, it's like, look, just bloody well write any first sentence because you can come back to it. You can do this after you've done everything else. And actually, when you've done everything else, it will be easier for you to find the perfect entry point to the story. But until you've got the story as a whole down, it is going to be difficult, if not impossible, to craft that opening sentence.
Totally. I think even Harlan Ellison said something like that. He said, like, never go into your next writing session where you're starting from scratch. Like, if you're on fire and you're writing, and you know you feel like you're in the groove and you've been writing for a while, stop and set it down, and that way you'll never start cold. Like, you'll come back and you'll be engaged
Mm,
and ready to, like, chip away at the rest of that. But it's when you stop a scene, or you get to a point that you're maybe frustrated and you don't know where to go. Don't stop there, because you're just going to
mm,
be frustrated when you come back to the computer later.
mm.
Yeah, that's
Nah,
true.
yeah,
Something
that's
has to be
really good
said though for when
advice.
you nail that first sentence.
Yeah.
It's like when it, sometimes that can like create the whole momentum that you need.
Totally.
But I'm also like Michael. It's like, well, I got to start somewhere. Just move on. Just get it on the page.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as well, and we've certainly kind of touched on this with what we're saying anyway, but just in case we need to make it more explicit for people, it's important to concentrate with the words on the quality over the quantity. And I mean, if you just decide, right, well, I have to hit, let's just say 2,000 words, well, you might just start bashing out really bad words to hit that quota. But actually, it'd be far more
Right.
effective to spend the day and to have 500 meticulously crafted words than just 2,000 words that you're going to have to go back to anyway. It's almost like you're comforting yourself by hitting that word count, but actually you're creating more work long term. So you think you're being productive, but
Yeah.
it's actually counterproductive.
Right. Yeah, it really does come down to quality at the end of it, is how many of those 2,000 words are going to be cut, or you're going to have to rewrite. So try, like, it works for me to think like that, and write, like, okay, today I want to write between 1,000 and 2,000. If I don't get there, it's no big deal. But
Mm,
what works for me may not work for another writer. That's
yeah.
why writing advice in general is just very difficult to pass on to people, because everybody's creative process is so different. And every creative process, whatever process it takes you to write a novel or get a story finished, is totally valid. So, however you work and however you get the words on the page, as long as you get them on the page somehow and they're not just in your head, that's all that matters, really. And telling the story as, effectively and compellingly as possible.